had our office at Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions, which is about 2.5 blocks that way. And for those of you who are familiar with LACE, as it is called, they have an equally long history going back into the 70s. Filmforum actually did screenings at LACE in downtown LA in the 80s. But it's really wonderful to be working with them again on a regular basis as well. They're always doing really great installations and performance art, really a hub for sort of the history of performance art in Los Angeles. And it's been really great to work with their current exhibition, Unraveling Collective Forms, curated by Daniela Lieja Quintanar. No, I've gotten the last name wrong. Quintanar. My apologies. Who, when she has curated the screening, the exhibition at LACE, she brought up to us the possibility of having an additional screening of works by artists in the exhibition, which was a fantastic idea. And so curating this screening as well, and it's been wonderful to work with her. And so to tell you more about this evening's screening, please join me in welcoming Daniela.
Thank you for coming. And yes, this screening is connected with the show that we have right now, Unraveling Collective Forms at LACE. If you haven't had a chance to visit, we are going to be there. The show is going to be there until May 25th, and we're open Wednesdays to Sunday, noon to 6 p.m. And the show is inspired by a quipu, the quipu, which is the quipu is a writing, it's like an ancient language from the Incas culture. It's a writing form through knots, and the idea of the show is like display some different threads from the different artworks and artists that are presented there, and invite the people to really like knot together the different reflections. And most of the artists are reflecting around collective resistance, autonomy, group manifestations that crack systems, and it has a specific axis on an indigenous point of view. The show, because the indigenous are the ones that has been able to, for a long time, to sustain the resistance. And so it's very inspired by these indigenous groups. For this screening, we have 4 amazing artists that also are part of the show. Sky Hopinka, who is a filmmaker, and he identified himself as indigenous from North America continent, Hochunka Pechunga indigenous group that is like from the Wisconsin area. And then we have Arisha, who is a performer, visual artist, and filmmaker. And she's LA-based, born in East India, immigrant. Then Jeannette Ehlers, that we have her here, so she's gonna be talking with us by the end of the exhibition. She's from Denmark with Trinidad heritage, and she's a visual artist and also performer. And she right now is doing a residency at 18th Street, that is also other great place in LA for artists that are coming from different parts of the world. And then Cecilia Vicuña, who has been the one that has been using the quipu in the structure of her art practice. She's exiled from Chile, and she has been living in New York for the last 40 years. So all these films are connected because these artists are using different strategies to make visible the invisible. They are using strategies with invisibility, with fainting, ghostly strategies. They are using myths, language, and memories as ways to create different narratives outside of the Western aesthetics and the Western narratives and against the Western narrative. So they come from different backgrounds, and we invite you to actually put together, not together, weave together these films. Yeah, and I think that's it for now.
Daniela Lieja Quintanar and Jeannette Ehlers, please come on up. And Zanna Gilbert. Zanna Gilbert, please join us. Stick around.
She left?
Did Zanna leave?
I don't know.
I think she went to the bathroom.
Okay, she'll join us in just a second. So thank you both. Once again, thank you for bringing a lovely film. I wanted to apologize about the sound dropouts of the first two. I think, I'm still not fully certain. I think we were running things through a 5.1 to try to help with the bass, but I think it caused that, and then we went back to settings for stereo for the last two, which did fix it, but so my apologies. Okay, so I want to, if you would, initial thoughts. One thing you said in introducing it was about the notion of how these in different ways, perhaps, the different manifestations, perhaps, of collective resistance, or your thoughts behind the exhibition. And I wanted to see what your thoughts might be on how the films played into that. Or perhaps let's start with your thoughts on on Black Magic at the White House. As here's Zanna. Please. Please tell us a bit more about the White House and how you came to work there, and whether you feel that's an appropriate way for you, the way that you see your film as an act of resistance of some sort.
Yeah. Well, thank you first for inviting me to this, and for inviting me to be here today. Well, the White House in my video is Marienborg, which is a mansion that was built in 17-something, I think it was 1778, by this captain who was involved in the industry of the slave trade. Everyone was at that point in Denmark. So Denmark was were colonizers in the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands. They were former Danish islands for more than 200 years. So this guy, Alfred Fischer, he bought, or he built this house in 17-something as his summer residence. So it's built on money from the industry, and a lot of other people, merchants who lived there after him. They were also involved in the industry. So it really has deep roots to the Danish colonial past. And many of you might not know that Denmark was a colonizer, and I didn't know either, because it's not something that we are taught in Denmark. It's always other nations, other European nations. So when I first realized that it was built from money from the trade, I found it very appropriate to use that house, because today it serves as the Danish Prime Minister's residence, official residence. So it's a very important place and a very powerful house. So I felt that it was an act of resistance and an act of revealing our colonial past and confronting our colonial past by using that house as my location. And to make this ghostly imagery has really been something I've been working on for a long time, but in this particular situation it really worked well, because it's the presence and absence kind of situation. It's there, but it's not there. We don't want to see it, but it's there everywhere. You see it in the bricks. You see it everywhere if you look for it. And I went to the Virgin Islands, to the former Danish Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and when you go there, you see the Danish impact everywhere. You see the names of the street names are Danish, many of them at least. You see the architecture is also Danish, but when you come to Denmark and look for reminiscence from the colonial past, you don't really see it unless you know it. So this is one way to kind of reveal that and to, as I already said, confront that and to take this into discussion.
Was it difficult to gain access to the house for the film?
Yes, it was very difficult, and actually I didn't succeed. So I wrote the Danish Prime Minister a few times, and finally I got an answer from his secretary saying that I could not enter the space because of, or due to safety, something, I don't know why, but I couldn't. But I had to find another place that kind of imitated this house. We have a lot of those mansions in Copenhagen, so I just found one and made it there. This video is 10 years old. It was made in 2009, and then I have to tell this story while we're talking about this house because December last year in 2018, I was approached by a curator from Denmark who was restoring Marienborg, the mansion, and he's working with architects and artists and stuff, and he asked if they could buy one of my works because they wanted to have something around the Danish colonial past. They wanted to have art that dealt with that. So some things have happened. Some things have happened since 2009. There's a little consciousness starting to unfold in a way, or to come. So that was really like somehow the ancestors were with me and made sure that we would plant a seed there, and now it's I got access. Actually, I went there and I put up not a painting but a photo. It wasn't the video that they wanted. They wanted another photo. So it's there now, and hopefully it will make people reflect because a lot of people come to the house. They have meetings and all that. So hopefully it is a way of to have people reflect upon our colonial past and how it impacts today, because it doesn't my intention is not to talk about the past, is also to talk about the present, of course. So
could you tell us a little bit more about why the dance, the Voodoo Dance, that is a ritual, and also it's like something performatic that also we found in the other films, the element of the dance with Cecilia, and then the body in Sky Hopinka, and Arisha is more like the hands are there and the voices. And also this is connected with the work that she has that you have at Lace, with Haiti and the Haitian Revolution and the Voodoo. Like why using this strategy, and also you performing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I found it very obvious to use myself as the protagonist, because I'm right here and I'm the artist, and artists, we use ourselves as medium. And I love dancing, and I've been dancing a lot when I grew up. So it also was very natural for me to use that method to create this video. And I don't really, in my videos or in my work, I normally don't speak much, so I like the bodily expression. That's really my force, I think. So it was very obvious to me to do that. And then I was also, I was very inspired by the Haitian voodoo culture, and the veve that I'm doing, the pattern that I'm doing is Papa Legba, and it's a ritual. It's an opening ritual for a voodoo ceremony. So it opens up to the outer world, or So I found that was also really like relevant to use that particular bebe, and yeah, I think that's.
I was wondering if like the degree, whether it was a dilemma for you, the sort of degree of visibility that your figure would have when you're producing the film. Because you talked about it already, that you kind of wanted to have this like presence and absence. Did you work with that until you achieved like specific effect you wanted?
Yeah, I actually made a version where I was completely erased, and it didn't work. I don't think it worked well. I liked those kind of glimpses where where you actually see me, to kind of get this like attention or moment. So yeah.
But did you ever explore like being completely visible, or no? You wanted to have that kind of.
I definitely wanted to have invisibility. That was the main idea. But then along the way, I tested what worked well, and because that wasn't. I mean, I had worked a lot with invisibility before, and in this particular case, it just talked so much about also the Danish consciousness and the ignorance kind of is very very massive in relation to our colonial past. So it was definitely talking about that. But actually, as I said, this is from 2009, and a lot of my other works, like later works and my recent works, they are more about manifestation, where we're visible and we're here and we're present. So it's a journey for me and my development in a way.
Any questions from any of you yet? Or thoughts on Jeanette's film or any of the others? Not yet? All right.
I was thinking when you were talking about performance and like the sort of embodiment question, I was thinking about this sort of distinction that some writers have made between the idea of the sort of the archive and the repertoire, and so like the archive being like the written history that is kind of consulted in like a more a sort of, I guess, Western way, and then the repertoire being this kind of like embodied understanding of history that can be called upon. And thinking about that in relation to Cecilia Vicuña's work, and the sort of image from her film that stands out to me, or that sort of keeps coming back to me, is the typewriter with the ball of wool, which really relates to the piece that's in the exhibition, Chankanikipu, which is this kind of clash between sort of written word and another kind of epistemology, or like another way of seeing the world. And then she uses all this unspun wool, and in the sort of cosmologies that she draws upon, the unspun wool is like this kind of pure potency, is something that's kind of waiting to be transformed. It's like raw potentiality, and then she sort of contrasts that with the written word. And I think like that sort of typewriter and the ball of wool, which also like signifies many other things. There's like the menstrual blood and the sort of connection to the earth that is embodied in that. But I feel like that comes back to those questions of kind of different ways, and the kipu is precisely that, right? Different ways of understanding, recording history, and how then like the primacy of history kind of in the Western sort of teleological way is established, and then openness to other kind of modalities of knowing the world, like cyclical, which I think like Cecilia's film really does that, even just in its structure, right? It's kind of weaves things through. I think she shot there were 12 sort of individual films that were then edited together, and so there's this kind of continual feeling of coming back and coming around.
It was very poetic.
Yeah, and like kind of revisiting earlier performances that she'd done as a way of kind of rethinking them or reinscribing them, and she keeps coming back to that sort of.
Yeah, and I think this idea of recording the history in a different way, or approaching the history in a different way, and you approaching a history that also is hidden, that is it's how you say, like repression, you know, like it's pushed down. And Arisha also in the movie, when she's like talking with this archivist, that he's like the insectology. He say how he say about the insects that the insects will get preserved better in a dark than in the light, and you bring in like light into this history. It's just very important, like these ways of how to approach these histories that are there hidden, and they're also constantly pushing it down, and how to bring them back, present.
Yeah, and also like he said that this fly or whatever it was that was more than 100 years old was fresh.
I know, it does not look fresh.
Yeah, but also, no, but still, I mean, that's also with history, when you haven't really, like, for instance, in Denmark, as I said before, the consciousness around the issues of colonialism is so, like, new to Danish people. We don't even have a vocabulary around it. We don't have words integrated in our language talking about or discussing these issues. So it's really like we're like trying, and that's what I and a lot of other people are trying to push, to kind of start a conversation and to, because we're just we are way behind, and we're on this level. As we're here, of course, it's on a different level because it's been going on the conversation has been going on for a longer time. So,
why do you think it hasn't sort of been addressed before in other countries?
I mean, from a Danish point of view, I think it has been addressed, but not really. But I think one of the reasons why the Danes have managed to erase it or to ignore it is because the Danes sold the Virgin Islands to the U.S. back in 1917. So in that sense, they could kind of just do like this and put it away, and
so they didn't go through like a independence
immigration
process
and all that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of descendants from the Virgin Islands, and it has been. I mean, we have a huge archive of everything around, but it has been put away in the dark. Yeah. So I think, I think that's one of the reasons why. But it's also like the Danes are also, of course, have been colonizing other nations like Greenland and Iceland and stuff like that, and still it's not really something that is out for discussion. It's beginning now, and there's a lot of things going on in Denmark now. It's really like horrifying, but I think that's one of the reasons why.
So just been hidden. To bring in the conversation Sky Hopinka, who we haven't mentioned, and talking about like this, bringing the conversation about the colonization, about like these histories. I think here the conversation about the indigenous groups are also put very aside, and it's kind of coming up. And Sky, what he's doing in his film work, it's connected with that, like trying to reject the anthropological, all this like history photograph, this idea of the extermination of the natives, and he's like using other narratives and connecting his identity, indigenous identity with the landscape. And I thought that's like a great way to like embrace and bring back the conversation, and also step out of these Western narratives that I think all the filmmakers in these films are like trying to like it's like a game of taking distance and rejecting and making visible.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, one thing that also crops up with back to the entomologist again, or it just goes back to the theme you were already addressing, is like this sort of like scientific cataloging of other things in the world being like this very traditional, I guess, Euro North American mode of knowledge through colonization and conquest, or like the way one justifies it in the name of science. And then the different ways, again, that you're addressing is like, what other ways are there to understand the world? What other ways are there for knowledge or tradition to be passed on? And one thing I'm curious about is the effectiveness, or what your thoughts are of the effectiveness of film, of time-based media art, as being a way of passing on that knowledge in a different form. How does it escape, say, the Western tradition of passing on knowledge? Is cinema a useful tool in that, since obviously it's also so embedded in Western technological narrative forms? Any initial thoughts on that for me?
Well, I mean, I guess now, there's a sort of long history of the second part of the 20th century of sort of people co-opting technology for different kinds of modes of representation. So I think like the debate about, whether a technology like film and video can help or not is kind of redundant in a way, because it's like it is, and it's a form of representation that we have that's sort of mass mediatic. So I mean, in terms of reaching audiences, for me, like thinking about Cecilia's work, it's very much about kind of sharing her sensitivity to an awareness of sort of planetary and like cosmological awareness of the planet. And I think I was actually just thinking, wow, there's quite a decent number of people here that that then like effectively touches everybody that's been in the space. And I think that's her kind of intention, is, although of course it's not being watched by huge numbers of people, but her intention is to kind of touch and affect people with the kind of awareness that she has, that she says that she experiences, an awareness in the natural world. Like she says in the film, she sensed the sea sensing, and so that the idea of all the world as being conscious, and I think that her film attempts to try and kind of just share that and have people take it on board and continue to work with it. But I don't see kind of the technological question is really, I don't think that can just be, the answer would be, well, we won't use it, and therefore, but that is our mode of communication now, so it's not really an option.
I agree, and I also agree that the reason why I make my films or my art is, I would rather talk about art in general, because I really believe that art can change, maybe not like overnight, but slowly, and it can impact people and maybe change perspectives. I really believe that that is a way. People perceive it differently, and it might not change anything like in the beginning, but then suddenly it's in your body. It's like maybe you move differently or whatever. So that's why I do what I do.
Perceived differently. Please.
I had a question for Daniela. When you were, I guess, choosing films, or these specific films, did you sort of tie them or see relations to like Los Angeles as a place? Because I know that at the beginning, Tongva were mentioned, and it's sort of, I guess, interesting being in Los Angeles with so many layers and so many smorgasbord of just stuff that's on this place, and I guess how, or maybe I'm asking, did you ever, I guess, consider when, I guess, being here, how we as people can use, I guess, some of, you know, Cecilia's knowledge or practices to find healing in a place that has so many, I guess, layers of like zones, and I mean also I was gonna say that there's also a lot of invisibility with like immigrant workers here, so I feel like the curation was just like incredible. So congratulations.
Thank you.
But I was just wondering, yeah, what your thoughts on being here as a place and the films, if that was something that you really thought about.
Yeah, I think more than talk about it is something that I feel like going back to like I have it on me because I'm an immigrant and I'm a recent immigrant with 5 years in Los Angeles, and I keep saying this to people, like Los Angeles opened me a universe, multiple cosmos, you know. And I think even if Cecilia, her work is actually not, she produced it in New York and Chile, it still is like something that I feel like influence what it means living here in Los Angeles, and also being in Mexico or in other place, because also it's like I think of like the resistance is happening in different parts of the world, and also I have the opportunity to do like almost at the end of my preparation for the exhibitions to meet Jeannette at the 18th Street, and I mean she's from Denmark, but it was like so connected with what we were thinking here. So I think, yeah, like Los Angeles is a place, but yeah, I guess more than thinking, it's embedded on me. Yeah.
Mm. I mean, the issues that we raise are universal. So, of course, I mean, I feel a strong connectivity to an ancestral connectivity, but also global connectivity to resistance movements and all these different struggles. Like you said, the invisible workers, like, you know, it's all connected, in my view. Also due to the colonial project that kind of created this situation for so many people. So it's obvious that it's connected to not only Los Angeles but all over the world, actually.
Yeah, we'll quote the Zapatistas when they think about is a revolution, intergalactic revolution, you know? Like it's a resistance, and they are also the ones that cover their faces to be visible. So it's distinct.
There's, I mean, one thought also, just briefly. I mean, I also think in terms of the United States also doesn't ever really discuss itself as a colonial or an imperial power. I mean, just even with the disasters in Puerto Rico, and it's like the government, like, wait, Puerto Rico is part of the U.S., and the number of people who think of just like, again, Puerto Rico's like somewhere else, but you know, we're imperial power since, well, the 1890s, and yet the language they develop is like, oh, we'll bring democracy to other places, like a new justification for just the same old. I saw another hand somewhere in there.
I was going to ask a question,
Please.
Following on your question, which is about audience. So it seems to me like these works have more than one audience in mind, and that at least two audiences exist for each of these works, one of which represents people who might see themselves in the work, and one of which represents people who might never have seen a worldview like the one presented in the work. And I think to the question about why film, that's why I want to ask this question, is what is it about film as a medium that might make it possible to connect with both of those different communities of audience?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's. I mean, I feel very familiar with the film medium because I grew up with it. You know, we all, like you said, also it's like part of our everyday life in so many ways. So it's easy to understand in a way, even though it could be very difficult because it's the nature of some films that are very experimental. But you know, it's very easy to, like music. You know, it's easy to listen to music and it's easy to get drawn by music. So I think it's kind of the same thing. It's at least my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's like a very popular medium all around the world. But also it has like a, I don't know, like a experience, like a visual, immediate experience that you can easily connect to. But also I'm like thinking about like, well, this is kind of more like in urban cities. We're still like, I don't know, like speaking about indigenous groups, there's a lot of indigenous groups that they don't have access to this visual movement, no? Like images in movement. So I'm not sure if I mean, still like can be connected, but if you are not familiar, if you don't grow up seeing a TV, that could be also like a clash.
Mm-hmm. But there's a huge kind of indigenous video movement, right, since the 70s. So there's also that idea of kind of hijacking the medium and then making what, sort of self-representation projects. And I mean, what strikes me about all of the films, which I thought like worked so amazingly together, just the incredible richness of each of the projects, and especially that many of them drew on these kind of different archival sources, and were trying to sort of patching together the complexity of the histories that they were dealing with. And I think that's something really specific, right, to film, in that there's this like in Cecilia's film, she kind of just weaves together all these disparate and different elements, which that's what she does in her practice more generally and in her performances. But then there's this kind of bringing around at the end where she has these printouts of photos, which is kind of like almost quaint in relation to like the complexity of the way the film's brought together. And then, there's also that kind of idea of the quipu that she makes, which is a web, is kind of like the structure of the film, which I think is really nice. So she's using like the quipu notion of the quipu of writing something through thread as like her kind of structural device for the film. So it's almost like a sort of adoption of the quipu method or something. But maybe it's to do with like the complexity of history and the histories that are being dealt with, and the kind of levels of things being buried that need this kind of treatment, right? That only maybe film or moving image can do.
I'm sorry, just have an idea. No, it's just that very simple thing, but it's like it's accessible. It's just so easy to get a film. You don't have to pay for, like in terms of like, Cecilia just sent it from Seattle, no? And then we get the film, and then we get to see this work that is connected with a whole amazing knowledge. But just like that digital technology that is always portrayed as devil, in this case is like good. Yeah, we can like share it. It's accessible to many people in terms of audiences, yeah.
Well, I also think there's one other side of it, which is the perceptual experience of being an audience member, and that you're having both a private and a collective experience simultaneously while watching something. So it creates like a safer space to view something that could be accusatory, perhaps, or something where you would feel, as you said, how do you state the second one? If the audience of people who would not normally see themselves in the work at all, it creates like the collective dark way of viewing it. The collective viewing of it in the dark allows a safer way to begin to comprehend or to take in things, while you're also like committed to being in your seat and actually watching it through, which is different from, say, a gallery experience of the piece. And yet at the same time, it totally gets in one's head. Well, so I think that's one of the unique powers of it. And I mean, also I think part of seeing it in a theater as opposed to, I mean, that goes in it. We'll go into theater versus gallery perception. We'll do that different conversation. But anyway, any more hands right up here?
So I'm very interested in the kind of non-verbal telling of history, and how I guess basically you refer to like starting a conversation, repeatedly, and I guess I'm interested in knowing in communicating non-verbally, is it because you struggle to articulate something and so you're trying to find a way to tell that? Or do you kind of know what you want to say and you're trying to use metaphors to say it? That's kind of half the question. And then the other half is, the piece is 10 years old, and I'm curious if you did struggle to communicate 10 years ago, are you able to better verbalize it now? Because you kind of have started that conversation.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
No, yeah, it definitely is, because I'm much better with images and like bodily expressions than I am verbally and articulate. So that is, I mean, and also my ideas, they are more like visual than verbal. So I might have a feeling or like an intuitive like thing that I want to communicate, and sometimes I know exactly what I want to do, like how I want to express that, and most of the time it's through like a bodily act. And of course sometimes I do. I mean, I have read something up, like a text or something, but it's something that I know. So I don't really do like, what do you call it? When you kind of just, not experimenting, but when you kind of just, like musicians, they sometimes just play.
Like riff,
yeah, exactly. So I think it's also the nature of me. I mean, I'm not really like, I don't really like to talk at all. But I do like to talk, but I just don't like to hear my own voice, and I'm not an actor at all. So I just, I do what I find right for me. And but I have, of course, since 2009 until today, I have, my world has expanded enormously, and also my the way I articulate and my knowledge production has expanded also. So it's been a very, very fruitful journey, and extremely important for me and for my life and my artistic projects.
But also that's just want to add a little bit about the, like, it's also, we always have like this that is a Western idea of like conversation is just through a language, through speaking, or through the ideas are in a book, or we write them, we have them, and then there's always like this attachment to the body, and I think the Cecilia and this project, your film too, is like the experience of the body has to be included on that, and the idea of the quipu. I mean, the Incas, they have it was a sensory, multisensory language. It was like visual, but you were like feeling it. So I think that's also.
I think like thinking about Cecilia as a poet is really interesting for that reason, because she is obviously like she's starts many things with the written word, but they quickly become visual. So she's kind of, I guess, coming out of this kind of visual poetry, concrete poetry movement of the 60s, where they were like experimenting a lot with the sort of materiality of language. But then, yeah, she really interrogates the word every opportunity. Like, she was asked, I remember seeing her be asked, because she was in the Radical Women exhibition at the Hammer, and asked about radical feminism, and she went like straight for the root of the word, of radical, which is root, and feminism to femme, and so she kind of like uses language to sort of deconstruct, but it's not really just deconstruction, it's like she's kind of just stripping away all the layers of shit that are kind of covering up like what the real meaning of something is. And I was thinking about why, because Concon is spelt with a C in the place name, but her film is Concon with a K, and I was trying to figure out why she had done that, just thinking about it over the last few days, and I have no idea, of course, but I feel like she's just kind of trying to estrange language, always, to make us think about it more. And I think that's like one of the ways in which, to become like sort of vitally aware of the language that we use, and where it comes from.
Yeah, I think like the K indigenous languages groups are trying to use this instead C, which is always the immediate Spanish colonization. You use the K, but you still are using alphabetic Roman thing.
That makes sense, yeah.
But just also the interesting thing about these artists is that Cecilia is doing also performances and also collaborative performances. You are doing performances. Arisha, she did a procession in the opening. It was a collective, amazing procession on the Hollywood Boulevard. So also these artists are, exploring different mediums and to start the conversation. So I appreciate a lot.
Collective responsibility and like collective possible redemption or something. And that's I feel that Cecilia is trying to, the sort of possible future would have to be a sort of collective project, right? It's not something that could be done any other way.
On that, actually, we have to halt here for the evening because we have until 10 o'clock, and it's 10 o'clock. But I want to thank the three of you for having such a wonderful conversation with us this evening, sharing your films. And thank you all very much for coming and enjoying the evening with us. We do have to get out of the building as soon as possible, but at the courtyard or outside elsewhere is all fine. But thank you all very much, and we'll see you again soon.